Dustin shocked me because we were shooting a scene.
Yes, look, you're gonna have to.
Very sorry about this.
My wine glass was sitting there and he rushed it so that it whizzed by my nose and broke on the wall and little pieces of glass.
Legendary actress Meryl Streep has won 3 Oscars, received more than 20 nominations, and is often hailed as the greatest living actress of our time. But even an icon like her has her limits. At 76, after decades of silence and careful avoidance of sensitive questions, Meryl Streep has finally decided to speak out. She reveals the 6 most evil actors of Hollywood's golden age, stars with outsized egos, and behind-the-scenes stories that audiences never knew. And the first name on her list shocked everyone, Dustin Hoffman. In 1979, Kramer vs. Kramer was released and quickly became a film that redefined the ideas of family, marriage, and divorce. The movie earned both lead actors Academy Awards and delivered unforgettable performances that became benchmarks of cinema. But behind that success was a silent battlefield where Meryl Streep, still a newcomer, found herself clashing with Dustin Hoffman, already one of Hollywood's most established names. Their on-screen chemistry was explosive, but off-screen their relationship was distant and cold. What audiences never saw was how things spiraled from the very first day on set. At the time, Meryl Streep was still grieving the loss of her fiancé John Cazale, struggling to find her footing in an unforgiving industry. Meanwhile, Dustin Hoffman, known for his extreme method acting, chose a brutal path to force his co-star into raw performances. During their very first take, he unexpectedly slapped her across the face, a slap that was neither scripted nor rehearsed, but a deliberate attempt to provoke emotion. Years later, Meryl Streep told the New York Times that it was an overstep, something that left a lasting scar. But the slap was only the beginning. According to journalist Michael Schulman in his unauthorized biography Her Again, Becoming Meryl Streep, Hoffman even whispered the name John Cazale into her ear just before filming a climactic courtroom scene, cruelly exploiting her grief to elicit a real emotional breakdown. The result was one of the most powerful performances in cinema history, but for Meryl Streep, the personal cost was devastating. What could have been a strong artistic partnership instead turned into decades of cold silence. During one scene, Meryl Streep firmly warned Dustin Hoffman after he suddenly smashed a wine glass without telling her, sending shards flying across the set. Cinematographer Nestor Almendros once observed that Meryl Streep worked like a precision instrument, every gesture and every vocal shift carefully calculated. In contrast, Dustin Hoffman treated acting like a jazz improvisation, unpredictable and chaotic. To him, spontaneity was art, but to Meryl Streep, it was recklessness disguised as brilliance. Their opposing methods created constant tension, forcing director Robert Benton to act as a peacemaker. And although the film earned both of them Academy Awards, the personal cost lingered long after. Dustin Hoffman never publicly addressed the slap or the glass incident. His closest explanation came years later at a BAFTA tribute, when he admitted he was going through a divorce and had been partying with drugs, leaving him depleted in every way. It was not an apology, merely an excuse. For her part, Meryl Streep later reflected that the industry had changed, and such behavior would no longer be accepted, which she saw as a positive shift. But the biggest surprise came in 2020, when she appeared on Friday Night with Jonathan Ross and softened her tone. Meryl Streep said all was forgiven, that she truly admired Dustin Hoffman and believed he was an incredible actor, though she admitted she had been furious that day. It was the first public sign that she had let go, not because Hoffman had earned her forgiveness, but because time had eased the anger, not erased the memory, not justified the actions, only quieted them. And for Meryl Streep, that kind of preparation was not simply part of the job, it was the foundation of truth. Every detail, every shift in tone, every movement carried the weight of months of study. Kevin Kline, on the other hand, thrived in the immediacy of the moment, trusting impulse over meticulous design. What audiences later saw on screen in Sophie's Choice was the collision of those two worlds, raw improvisation meeting painstaking precision. Director Alan J. Pakula often found himself navigating that contrast. He praised the brilliance both actors brought but acknowledged privately that their methods created an undercurrent of tension. For Meryl Streep, embodying Sophie meant carrying the collective grief of a people, channeling the voices of survivors she had studied so closely. For Kevin Kline, Nathan was discovered in flashes of instinct, alive and shifting from take to take. The result was extraordinary cinema, but beneath it was a quiet frustration that never entirely dissolved. Even George Jenkins, the production designer, remarked that working with the two was like watching an architect and a jazz musician attempt to compose the same symphony. Both gifted, both unforgettable, but never fully in harmony. And while Sophie's Choice became the film that cemented Meryl Streep as the greatest actress of her generation, it also left behind the echo of what collaboration might have been if discipline and instinct had found common ground. To Meryl Streep, working with Jack Nicholson was a collision waiting to happen. Where she demanded discipline, research, and transformation, he thrived on presence, magnetism, and instinct. Their collaboration came in Ironweed, 1987, a bleak Depression-era drama that paired two titans of American acting. On screen, their chemistry carried the weight of broken dreams and human despair. Off-screen, however, the process revealed just how far apart their methods truly were. Meryl Streep built Helen through painstaking immersion, studying historical accounts, observing mannerisms of women crushed by poverty, and carrying that exhaustion in every frame. Jack Nicholson, by contrast, slipped into Frances Phelan with little visible preparation. He trusted his natural charisma, letting spontaneity dictate the rhythm of each scene. For many, it was vintage Nicholson, unpredictable, alive, undeniably compelling. But for Streep, it felt like improvisation without anchor, artistry without reverence. Director Hector Babenco often found himself balancing two worlds. With Streep, he adjusted lights and sound to capture the smallest flicker of emotion. With Nicholson, he simply let the camera roll, knowing sparks, for better or worse, would erupt. The tension wasn't outright hostility, but an undercurrent. A sense that they were never quite working toward the same vision. Later, when reflecting on the film, Meryl Streep praised Nicholson's talent but with carefully measured words. She acknowledged his brilliance, yet her tone carried distance, a quiet admission that his style was not one she could ever truly embrace. For her, acting was sacred transformation. For Jack Nicholson, it was charisma bent into character. The difference produced unforgettable cinema. But it also ensured they would never share the screen again. The result was a professional stalemate. Two giants of American cinema, forever linked by a pair of films that promised greatness but delivered tension instead. To audiences, their performances in Heartburn and Ironweed were strong, even iconic in their own ways. But to those behind the scenes, it was clear that the partnership was built on cracks too deep to mend. For Meryl Streep, the experience reinforced her conviction that acting was a sacred craft, something to be approached with discipline and respect. For Jack Nicholson, it reaffirmed his belief that instinct and charisma were enough to carry a role. Neither was wrong, yet neither could bend to meet the other halfway. Hollywood never saw them reunited again. Scripts came and went, projects surfaced and faded, but there was always an unspoken acknowledgement that Streep and Nicholson simply belonged to different schools of art. She pursued transformation, disappearing into characters until they eclipsed her own identity. He pursued presence, bending characters to his will and elevating them with his unmistakable persona. In the end, their feud was never loud, never scandalous. It lived instead in silence, in the roles declined, in the collaborations that never happened, and in the measured words they chose whenever the other's name appeared. Two legends, standing side by side in history, yet forever separated by their visions of what true acting should be. Number 4, Robert Redford. Where Nicholson clashed with Streep over instinct versus discipline, Redford posed a different challenge altogether: the absence of connection. At first, the crew mistook it for creative tension, the kind that often sparks brilliance. But as filming continued, it became clear that Meryl Streep and Alec Baldwin were operating on two very different frequencies. She viewed comedy as a craft of timing and truth, each moment calibrated. He treated it as a playground, where improvisation was not just allowed but essential. Director Nancy Meyers found herself in the middle, balancing two styles that clashed as often as they collided. With Streep, she leaned into detail, shaping performances with multiple takes until nuance emerged. With Baldwin, she encouraged freedom, hoping his spontaneity would add electricity. The result on screen was dazzling, their chemistry felt effortless. But behind the scenes, the effort was monumental. Crew members remembered moments when Streep quietly pressed for discipline, only to watch Baldwin shrug it off with charm. To the audience, it looked like magic. To those on set, it was constant negotiation, a push and pull between structure and chaos. Years later, when asked about working with Baldwin, Meryl Streep chose her words carefully, as she always does. She praised his talent, his humor, even his generosity as a performer. But beneath the compliments was distance, a sense that while their collaboration had produced a hit, it had not built trust. For Streep, comedy required the same reverence as tragedy. For Baldwin, comedy was instinct, wild and alive. Both approaches worked, but together, they left cracks. And though It's Complicated became a box office success, the partnership between its stars ended when the cameras stopped rolling. Number 5, Warren Beatty. If Alec Baldwin was chaos wrapped in charm, Warren Beatty was calculation wrapped in control, and to Meryl Streep, that was no less combustible. For Meryl Streep, however, survival was never the goal. The work had to mean something. It had to hold up under the weight of scrutiny, of history, of truth. And in her eyes, Alec Baldwin's looseness, however charming, risked cheapening that pursuit. She respected his talent, but she didn't trust his process. That was the difference. After It's Complicated, industry chatter occasionally floated the idea of reuniting the two stars in another comedy. But Streep politely declined, moving on to projects that demanded rigor, transformation, and absolute immersion. Baldwin, for his part, continued to praise her in interviews, always quick with a compliment, always public with admiration. Yet the silence from Streep spoke louder than words. She never disparaged him, never gave the press a feud to feed on. But she also never extended an invitation to collaborate again. And in Hollywood, that absence is its own verdict. The legacy of their partnership is simple: on screen, brilliance; off screen, distance. For Baldwin, the film remains a highlight, proof that he could stand beside the greatest of his generation. For Streep, it was a lesson that even the most effortless chemistry can be built on fault lines. Number 5, Warren Beatty. If Alec Baldwin tested her patience with chaos, Beatty tested it with control, a different kind of storm, but no less consuming. Over time, the distance hardened into something unmistakable. Meryl Streep never spoke ill of Gwyneth Paltrow directly, but she also never offered the validation Paltrow seemed to crave. In an industry where public praise between actors often flows freely, Streep's silence was louder than any critique. The two were photographed together at award shows, smiling politely, but there was no warmth in their body language. Colleagues noticed the gap. One actress who worked with both women remarked that Streep could mentor when she believed in someone, but with Paltrow she withheld, as though she didn't see the foundation to build upon. As Paltrow leaned further into her lifestyle empire, the gulf widened. To her fans, she was redefining celebrity. To Meryl Streep, she was drifting further from the sacred labor of the craft. When asked in later interviews about young actors she admired, Streep named dozens: Saoirse Ronan, Carey Mulligan, Florence Pugh, but never Paltrow. The omission became its own statement. For Paltrow, the absence of acknowledgement was wounding. According to one former Miramax insider, she confided that all she wanted was Streep's approval, a nod from the actress she'd been compared to since her debut. That nod never came. The result wasn't a feud in the tabloid sense, no outbursts, no bitter quotes. It was subtler, quieter, almost surgical. A dismissal not of Paltrow the person, but of what she represented, a Hollywood where charm could substitute for craft, and branding could eclipse performance. Number 6. Warren Beatty. Unlike Paltrow, whose ease unsettled Streep, Beatty unnerved her for another reason entirely: his reputation for control, both on and off the set. Still, Streep never attacked Paltrow directly. That's not her style. Instead, she uplifted actresses like Cate Blanchett, Saoirse Ronan, and Florence Pugh, women known for disappearing into their characters rather than dominating headlines. When asked about Paltrow's work in Proof, which was meant to mark her return to serious drama, Streep's response was surgical: "I think the film had strong intentions. Not strong performances. Not strong results. Just intentions." Paltrow, for her part, has been more vocal, though always cloaked in diplomacy. "Meryl is intimidating," she told Vogue in 2010. "She sets the bar for all of us. Whether or not she sees me that way, I don't know. She knew." And though she's attempted olive branches, social media praise, press compliments, even private notes, Streep has remained distant. "There are actors she keeps in her circle," said a former assistant. Gwyneth was never one of them. Number 6. Jeremy Irons. In the annals of cinematic tension, few rivalries simmered with as much intellectual heat as that between Meryl Streep and Jeremy Irons. This wasn't a feud born of tabloid scandal. It was deeper, an artistic collision between two titans of the craft, each unwilling to yield on their vision of what truth in performance really means. On paper, they should have been a dream pairing, both classically trained, both revered for their gravitas, both able to turn a whisper into an earthquake. But in the rehearsal room, the chemistry curdled. "Jeremy treats characters like beautiful objects to be polished and displayed," said famed dialect coach Tim Monick. "Meryl approaches them like archaeological sites, layer by layer, bone by bone." That contrast, poetry versus excavation, defined every beat of their working dynamic. Where Streep dug into the mess of humanity, Irons prized restraint and elegance. The breaking point came during workshops for historical drama that never made it to production. According to one insider, the rehearsal room felt like a battlefield of furrowed brows and suppressed sighs. During one break, Irons allegedly quipped, "My accents are flawless, but sometimes it feels like she's auditioning for best technique rather than playing a human being." For Streep, who believes detail is the gateway to truth, the remark landed like a slap. Her response, measured but sharp: "If you think emotional truth and detail are mutually exclusive, Jeremy, then you're not listening. You're performing at people, not for them." From that moment, the air turned arctic. They avoided each other at festivals. Their agents quietly steered them away from shared ensembles. And when asked which peers she admired, Streep once praised actors who surrender ego in service of story, a line many believed aimed squarely at Irons. Irons, never one to duck intellectual sparring, countered in The Guardian, "Meryl is extraordinary, no doubt. But sometimes technique can be seductive. You marvel at the skill rather than lose yourself in the character." To Streep, his method was emotionally cold. To Irons, hers was theatrical excess disguised as depth. The tragedy wasn't the feud, but the wasted potential. They could have created magic, one director lamented. But you can't build intimacy between actors who don't trust each other's intentions. In recent years, they've learned the art of diplomacy. Smiles at award shows. Polite nods at industry events. Even the occasional photo. But insiders confirm it's choreography, not reconciliation. Today, their relationship remains exactly what it became all those years ago, cordial, distant, and defined not by what was, but by what never could be.